Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight. I'm Lauren Scott, chair of the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee, and today we are excited to welcome 2023 Spot honoree Guadalupe Garcia McCall, author of Echoes of Grace. Also joining us today for this interview is Spot Committee member Nellie B. Manzetti. Nellie B. Manzetti is the librarian at Palmview High School in La Jolla ISD, located in South Texas. She has 18 years of experience in education, including 6 years as a high school librarian. Nellie is passionate about diverse literature for all readers and telling the story of the library through social media. She is a member of the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee. All right, take it away, Nellie.
Thank you for having me. And so I have the pleasure of introducing Guadalupe Garcia McCall. This is her biography. She was born in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico, and raised in Eagle Pass, Texas. Guadalupe Garcia McCall is the award-winning author of several young adult novels, some short stories for adults, and many children's poems. Guadalupe has received the prestigious Pura Belpre Award, a Westchester Young Adult Fiction Award, the Tomás Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award, and was a finalist for the William C. Morris Award and the Andre Norton Award for Young Adult Science Fiction and Fantasy, among many other accolades. Fluent in both Spanish and English, Guadalupe is a compelling speaker who has visited many middle schools, high schools, universities, festivals, conferences, and organizations all over the country. Her proudest distinction came when her alma mater, Sul Ross State University, selected to feature her image and biography on their Living the Dream 2, which is a cultural pride on campus mural outside of the Gallego Center. She is now a full-time author, a part-time educator, and lives in San Antonio, Texas with her husband, Jim, where she's working on 2 more books, Secret of the Moon Conch, which just came out this year, and Hearts of Fire and Snow, which should be coming out next year. So it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us. And so today we're going to be talking about Echoes of Grace, which is the title that was selected for the Spirit of Texas list, reading list. And so as you can see, we have all these other books as well, because this is just some of the other titles that Guadalupe has, and we carry them here in our library. Our students love to read your books. They love to be seen and validated. So thank you so much for providing representation for our kiddos.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank the committee first for picking Echoes of Grace, but I also want to say thank you so much for doing this interview and for taking time out of your busy schedule to honor me with this gift. I truly, really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And the pleasure is all mine, because I really hold you in very high regard. I think that you're a great author. You have this lyrical way of writing, and I see a lot of myself in your writing, especially your Ode to Papi, which I love. It's very meaningful to me, as I'm sure it is to you.
Yeah.
So, it's the pleasure is all mine, Guadalupe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with asking you a couple of questions in regards to your book. The first one is regarding to the setting. I love that the setting was set in Eagle Pass, Texas, and in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico. I like that it was in both, because living in the frontera, like I do here in McAllen Mission area, our kids are accustomed to that life, right? The frontera life, where they live here and there. And so I love that your book incorporated that. Plus, I noted in your biography that you were born there. So my question is, how easy or how difficult was it to set the story in your hometown?
Well, most of my stories are set in Eagle Pass / Piedras Negras. So I was born in Piedras and I came in when I was 6 years old. And so for me, that's going home. And when I've written other works, like when I did Shame the Stars and All the Stars Denied, and I made a fictional town that was very much like McAllen and Mission area, that took research. And I could detach myself and tell a really great story. However, with grace, because it was such an intimate story and it was so delicate and so important for me to tell it just right. And there were parts of it that hurt, like talking about the generational trauma, talking about the violence against women. Those are really hard topics. And so I wanted to go home for that. I wanted to go to a safe place, to a place that I had grown up in and that I knew had nurtured me during the hard times, during the difficult times, during the challenging times, but also celebrates me in these good times and in other good times I've had. And I needed that comfort, that familia around me to tell this really delicate, beautiful, heartbreaking story.
Yeah, well, that really does come through in your writing and all of the other stories as well, and in particular with this one. So you did mention that, you know, it deals with some very, heavy topics. This was going to be further down the line, but I guess since we're already talking about it, we're kind of hitting on it. Grace, let's see. Grace's echoes helped her piece together a time that she had completely blocked out. Can you explain how these echoes served as a way for her to heal from her past trauma? So for those of us that have read the book, we know that she experiences these echoes, right? And so hence the name. And how did the echoes serve her to be able to heal from her trauma?
I came up with the idea of echoes, silly enough, after I had just rewatched Stir of Echoes with Kevin Bacon. And it hit me that that's what was happening to her, that she was having echoes, but not just her own, right? But echoes like him about family members, traumatic events in the past. And then I started thinking about that. The memories that we carry stay with us forever, right? Especially the ones that are really hard and they're really difficult, as well as the ones that are really beautiful. They stay with us. The ones that emotionally touch us stay with us. But there's this theory I was reading about that we carry the memories of our ancestors in our DNA, that the trauma that they have experienced, the emotional moments they have had to overcome are written into our DNA. And that's why we have certain feelings. Like when you think of, you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you get like that deja vu. That's an echo of something that might have happened, not necessarily to you, but someone in your ancestry. Things like, how do we know? Why do we feel susto? And we're so scared when we're walking down a dark alley by ourselves and we hear something, or maybe even we're not even walking down a dark alley, we're just walking in the mall and we see something or we sense danger. And how do we have that? We have that through those echoes, through that DNA that kind of warns us and says, danger, danger, step away, move, walk, be alert. And so I wanted to show that, but I also wanted to show it in a deeper sense, because there's this mysticism in our culture, right? We believe in ghosts. We believe that our ancestors are still with us. I lost my mother when I was 17, but she stayed with me. I talk to her every day. She comes to me in dreams. She has actually given me warnings in dreams. And so I wanted to show that, how we are not just Catholic or religious, but spiritual. And that spirituality is what makes us and helps us access our DNA and on those things that will make us heal, not just ourselves, but the people around us and maybe even our community.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because you know how I was just telling you how I love the Big Bend and I love that area. When I was there, I just loved the desert. I just felt like it was calling me. And so then I have learned that my grandma's ancestors were from Coahuila, right? And so they were from a tribe, and she knew a dialect, but by the time that I learned this, she was already suffering from dementia. And so she didn't remember much. But you do feel like you say that deja vu, like you've been there before, like you've walked there before, like you just feel like it's calling you. And so it's
Right.
beautiful how you explain that it's difficult to explain to others that might not be superstitious or mystical, right? But you were able to depict it perfectly in the book through her echoes and how she was able to piece together her mother's story, and and ultimately heal from the trauma that her mom had lived and then that they were experiencing as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. That's one of the things that I noticed about your writing. Like, you really are very thoughtful about what you add, what you include. And when I said that you're very lyrical, it's very poetic the way that you write all of your books. Like, I don't know, it must be because you're a professor, but you're able to just make even a tragic story into a beautiful telling.
Well,
So
I think, one of the things I try to tell students all the time is that I really feel like I want to write something that is not just scandalous or wants to just, like yellow journalism or things like that. I want to write things that are helpful. So I may take subjects like cancer and divorce and generational trauma and, the lynching of Mexicanos and all those things I've written about that are dark things in our world, but I want to make light of that. I want to take that, infuse it, take it in, and transform it into something beautiful so that we can have hope. So I
yeah.
tell students all the time, I'm going to take you to the dark side, but trust me, I'm going to bring you back to the light.
Oh,
That's what it's about.
yeah. And then our pain has a purpose, right?
Right.
Awesome. So I know that you did hit on some topics that make your story a modern Gothic. What drew you to this genre? Have you
I've,
always had a love for this particular genre, or was it something that you were like playing with in your mind and how did it come about?
well, when I was in school, when I was in high school, I took the AP courses in English, and they made you read all kinds of genres and understand them and, like structurally, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I noticed about myself is I was really drawn to Gothic. I was drawn to Rebecca, Wuthering Heights, Frankenstein. I loved all those Dracula, and I loved them so much because they really were they were showing us how to transform yourself, how to really think about ethics and what you believe in and social justice issues. And so, and especially women's issues, like with Rebecca and Wuthering Heights and all those. And so I always loved that genre as much as I loved also Edgar Allan Poe and Shirley Jackson. So the darker things I loved as much as I liked the lighter things. But when I was writing Echoes of Grace, first of all, let me tell you that she gave it to me in tiny morsels. For 4 years, she gave me only like images, like the little caterpillar that just dies, that becomes a butterfly, then loses wings, dies, and disintegrates. That's all she gave me. And I was like, Grace, what does this mean? And she told me the truth. I don't know. I don't know, she said. And so when she would give me these images, I didn't know what to make of them. They were her echoes that she was giving me. And I didn't know that they were echoes yet. I had no idea what she was giving me. So for 4 years, I just collected everything. And then when it came time to write my thesis novel, I was also working on All the Stars Denied that semester and teaching full time. And then here I had to write a second novel. I had to do the thesis. I just pulled that out and put together like a little summary, put them in order and put together a little summary and said, I want to write this. And I think it's a Gothic. And the reason I thought it was a Gothic, because there were so many ghosts and so many supernatural things happening. And then there was that house in Mexico where she goes with the house that she finds her grandmother in. And I thought, yeah, this has got all the, elements of a Gothic novel. And that's what really, I think that's why I stayed with her, with Grace, for 4 years, is because I could feel and sense that there was a mystery and there was a Gothic element, and there was these beautiful supernatural images that she was giving me, and I didn't want to give up on it. But I was glad that I was able to put it together and to figure out that it was a Gothic novel.
Yes, it was wonderful. It's like modern, Las Mi Última-ish, and then it also has like the ghosts, the memories, like you say, piecing the memories together, the caterpillar, which was one of my next questions, but you kind of already talked about it. I know it's on the book, right? The moth, throughout the book, but the question was in regards to the caterpillar as into in the beginning of the book, Grace is inspecting a caterpillar. Can you explain the symbolism behind the caterpillar? So I know that you hit on how she was giving you tidbits, right? And then you understood that they were echoes, which was perfect because it led you to the title and it led you to piecing everything together. But is there any particular symbolism that you want us, the readers, to get from the caterpillar and her looking at it and her just seeing it like in its natural state?
So like I said, it was the first image she gave me. I had heard about a horrible incident in our neighborhood, and I knew that a child had perished, and it was a 2-year-old, and I knew how it had happened, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart to find out that a mother had run over her own child in our neighborhood, and that it was such a tragedy. And I was so upset about the social injustice of it all. Because for me, all I kept thinking is this young woman was trying to go to work. That's all she was trying to do, trying to get to work. And because she didn't have the money for daycare, and she didn't have the money for proper care for her child, this tragedy occurred. And the social injustice of it just hurt me so much. And I remembered a time when my sister and I used to have to take care of each other's young children, toddlers, so that we could get through college. She and I were married and we both had toddlers, but we would sit there in that study hall area and put down a blanket, colchas down, and throw the kids on the colchas, and then just feed him French fries from the study hall area. And so I remembered that, and my son said, "Mom, I was just remembering that when my son asked me, why are you so upset about this? Why are you upset about what happened? You don't even know them." And I said, "Honey, I was that girl. I was not just the sister that was supposed to be taking care of him on the porch. I was also the driver." And I said, "Not that any of you ever died, but we had to take care of each other's children." And the trust that has to go into that, the trust, right? It is so hard, but that is the cycle in life. We take care of each other. We take care of our own. We take care of each other's children too, if we have to. And so I went to bed after explaining that to my son, and that's when Grace came. She came to me in a dream, and I just remember her sitting like on a porch, and look, she had all her hair on her face, and I couldn't see her face. And I knew her name. I said, "Grace." what's going on? What do you have there? What you got there? And she turned and she showed me the caterpillar. And when it did all that transforming, that magical stuff, I just looked at it and I said, what does it mean, Grace? And she said, I don't know. But I came to understand later that the caterpillar is very much symbolic of innocence, that it's symbolic of the innocence that life is. We all come into this world innocent, and the generational traumas, the hardships, the battles, the goodness, but also the injustices, all of it changes us. And that's why the caterpillar transforms. Eventually we will die, but we will be transformed by the experience of having lived here. And I just loved that. I loved it, and I thought that has to be one of the first things I put in the book, because it was actually the first thing she gave me.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's so fascinating to me, like just a regular person, that you would get like inspiration in these like little dreams, these little echoes that you were getting, and how there's stories to be told in all around us, right? Like literally, like you heard that story in your neighborhood, and it took you to a place where you remembered your episodes in life where you had to struggle, right?
Right.
To reach your goals, to reach the American dream. And so it's just fascinating how you see stories everywhere. That's what I'm saying, that you're so poetic, like you see poetry all around you. And even if something that is like dark, you put a spin on it where it's like purposeful, like even the pain produces growth, produces, like fulfilling your purpose or your passion. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is in regards to your characters' names. I know that you mentioned that you just knew that that was her name, but I know that Grace also means like being allowed, you had a mishap, but you're being offered grace. And so it kind of did happen to her, right? That she witnessed that accident. So, I mean, was there any particular reason other than the vision that gave you that name? And then also even her sister's name, right? Mercy.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I at first when the first vision came and I knew her name was Grace, I just thought it was just a thing. I just thought, okay, great. I don't have to think about the name. Her name is Graciela, right? And and then when when I was fashioning the sister, I thought, what a great thing to call her Mercedes, right? Graciela and Mercedes, Grace and Mercy. That would be fun. And I didn't know until we get to the climax, when Grace is on her knees. Do you remember when Grace is in that old house?
Yes.
And she has seen so much, and so much has been revealed to her, that she is on her knees, right? It has brought her to her knees when she is calling her sister, and she's surrounded by all those terrible echoes, right? Like all those terrible entities. And it's like she's in the middle of the tornado. And she yells, mercy, mercy. That I thought, she's not just asking for her sister, she's asking for mercy.
Yeah.
From all the things, everything that is in her DNA, everything that she has inherited, all the awfulness that women through generations have had to go through. When we look at violence against women and all the injustices that happen, not just on the border, but all over the world. Yeah. Because violence against women happens in every corner of the world, to every socioeconomic group, and to women of every color, shape, size, and gender, not gender, I'm sorry, every aspect of a woman has had to go through this for generations and generations and generations, since the beginning of time. And so when she's asking for mercy, She literally is asking for mercy for womankind. And then I thought, and how do you get through life? How did you get through life, young woman? With mercy and grace. And that's how we're going to get through this. That's how we're going to get through all the violence against women, all the generational trauma, with mercy for each other and grace, instead of all the things we're doing right now. And I thought, oh, that makes sense. That's what this was about. Because sometimes I don't know what the theme of the book is until it just shows up on the page. And that's when it showed up for me. And I understood the names.
And especially because you know how in your first vision, right, you asked her, what is this? What do you got there? And she says, I don't know. Like she herself didn't even know. And you helped her piece it together and then even help us, other women that read it, right? And I love how you said that we're going to get through this with mercy and grace. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I tell you, you just make things that are like difficult and you make it, you put it in like pretty wrapping paper and you make it like, I like to remember that, like, even though it's like painful for your neighbor, right? The passing of her son, painful to every mother that heard that story, because all mothers like you think about our own children, and then painful to you because it brought up the memory of when you were going through school and the hustle was real. And you know, it brings us to that place too, right? That the pain that we've had, with mercy and grace, that will have a purpose.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
even the pain we've caused each other, because you know, she feels, even though it's not her fault, she feels like Alexander's death is her fault. And by asking for mercy to come to her, she's asking for, and she's also asking for mercy from the echoes. And so, yeah, to me, it's all about how do we get through the damage that has been done to us and the damage we've done to others.
Excellent point. Yeah. And then the damage that we do to ourselves too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Well, Grace herself is very poetic, much like yourself. Are there any is there any like similarities? Did you see yourself in Grace? Or is there any bit of Guadalupe that has a little grace in her?
I really want to say that most of my books has a little aspect of myself. You know, we're multifaceted, all of us, right? We have many different faces.
Yeah.
We are definitely the hero with 1,000 faces. I want to say 1,001 because we're women. But every book has a little bit of me. And that book has that part of me that was a young mother, that part of me that struggled to survive in a world that was so full of so many dark corners, that where I had just become an adult and had come into understanding the violence against women in the world. I had been sheltered all my life. My father did a great job of sheltering me. So when I went off to college and I became a woman and got married, I started seeing things, hearing things, experiencing things, and thinking, this is not right. This is horrible.
Yeah.
To be a woman is is to put ourselves in a really, really hard place.
Yeah,
and so I wanted to show that we are strong. We can get through this. I got through it. We all get through it. We can have mercy and grace for each other, and we can fight the good fight. And part of me is in grace, but also 3 of my sisters. I put all 3 of them together, and that she's mercy. That's why she's tremenda. It's all 3 of them together.
Yeah.
Because I was the studious one, and they were the oh no, we're gonna get married. We're gonna have a fun. We're gonna party. Yeah. So they were the Barbie girls, and I was the studious. So there is that kind of contention between mercy and grace, because I've been in that kind of contention in the past.
Oh, very interesting. And it's nice to get like reassurance that yes, that was a little bit of you, because I'm going to sound like a fangirl here, but every time that I read some of your books, I feel like if I know you, even though I don't really know you, like I think we may have only spoken a little bit like in TLA, but I feel like I know you, like, and I feel like I see a little bit of myself in your books, and I feel like Guadalupe, like she's like me. We're so alike.
We are all of us. Girls that have lived the lives we've lived on the border, going, like you said, back and forth into Mexico, in our culture. We have a lot of similarities, and we have a lot of strengths that we share. And I like to believe that that's one of the things I'm sharing. I'm sharing the strengths, illustrating them through the process of showing the injustices, but also how we can get through it.
Yeah. And for others as well, right, that might not live at the border, but they live in the rest of the state of Texas, that they can have that strength as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We can all learn from us.
Yes.
A little something.
So the next question is in regards to the organizational structure. I know you had like echoes back and forth, and I imagine, again, I'm not a writer, but I imagine that this is very hard to keep up with, like to narrate a story going back and forth, and without also revealing too much. Like you want to like save it for the end or for the climax of the story, right? So how did you manage all that?
Well, let me tell you that the novel that came out first, that I churned out in one semester while I was churning out another novel while I was teaching full-time 8th graders, that one was a little bit of a hot mess. So I turned it in and we revised it in the spring, because this was in the fall. And I still had only one narrative, one timeline that would have all the episodes and all the echoes just kind of like thrown in to guide it toward that climax. And my advisor was really good about understanding it. I mean, he understood what I was trying to say, but it was very literary, if you know what I mean. It was very up there. You had to be like almost an adult to understand the literary parts of it. And so that's what he loved about it. He had challenged me to write a novel that was not a YA. So I wrote it as a 20-year-old, and it was very literary, and he loved it. And, I got an A and all that. But when it came time to sell it, my agent called me and she said, "We need to talk about this one." I said, "Okay." And she said, "I have to tell you, I am at a loss with this novel, because there's all these things happening, and then there's the main thread of Grace, right? Grace and her sister, but all these things that are happening." She said, "It's very literary, but I don't know where it's going, and I always know where a novel is going." And she goes, I'm an expert at this, and I don't know where this is going." And I thought, well, isn't that a good thing? And she said, "It could be a good thing, but it could be a bad thing. Let's see what Stacy says," because we were sending it directly to Stacy. Stacy was the one that got her red pen out and just wrote all over it. And then she said, "Have you considered a dual timeline?" It would separate the time 3 years ago to the time now. And then all the others that are like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, you could throw those in there. And it'll make more sense, because then at least we have two timelines that are really important. Her present timeline and her 3 years ago, I've no idea what happened to me in Mexico timeline. And then you can put them together at some point. That's what she said, at some point. And I was like, okay. So I took out my sticky notes and I put it up on my wall like I always do, and I started doing the dual timeline. And it just was so fantastic how it fell together and how at the climax was the right time to put them together. And I felt like this is like the best advice I've ever received from an editor. But it takes a really great editor to, one, trust your vision,
Yeah.
and two, give you the right tools to present it to the world.
Wow, that's fascinating how it all came together. And an interesting thing that that you mentioned was that you end up putting it on the wall,
Yeah,
like your timeline.
always. Always. Um, right now, I actually have gotten better about it, but like for Summer of the Mariposas, that's when I started putting it on the wall. I threw up, I didn't have a whiteboard, and I was very, very much on a tight budget as an English teacher
Yeah.
with 3 kids. Yeah,
Say no
tight
more.
budget.
Say no more. I got you. I
Yeah,
understand.
I was like, I don't have time to go get a giant whiteboard, and I don't have the money to spend on a giant whiteboard and a whole bunch of markers.
Yeah.
Right?
And then what if it doesn't work? And what
Right.
do you do with a whiteboard now?
Yeah. And so what I did is I just sat there at my desk thinking, and then all of a sudden, got it. I went into the closet. I got old Christmas paper that was white on the back, and
Yeah.
I just ran a giant piece on the wall and stapled it. And then I took out the sticky notes in different colors and started putting them up there and doing the timeline for Summer of the Mariposas, right? And when I did that, I remember my husband came in and he goes, "Staples, really? You made holes in the wall?" And I said, "We'll take care of that whenever we sell the house. But for now, we're going to do this." And it worked so well that I did the same thing for Shame the Stars. I did the same thing for All the Stars Denied. Just put that plot chart. You remember the one that starts like this and then goes up and then comes down like that?
Yeah.
Freight text chart.
Free
Yeah.
text.
Yeah. Freight text chart. And then I would do all the sticky notes along that.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that you mentioned that because sometimes like when I was in the classroom, kids are like, I don't want to do that. Like that's a waste of time. Like I already know what's going to happen. But when you plot it out, you get to get a better, understanding or where areas are weak or where you can, put those interesting parts. And then another interesting thing that you mentioned is about how to me, it kind of resembles like I must watch a lot of forensic shows, right? But they always do that, right? Like they put it up on a wall and they like detectives. And I
Right.
feel like that was perfect for your book because you were trying to, figure out what Grace was telling you. You're being a detective
Right.
and you got the answer that you needed.
And so that's why I use different colors for the different, like the 2 plot lines were in different colors, right? And then every memory or thing that I knew was connected in some way, I would put it in different, also color code those. So everything on my board was color coded. And so the line that went up like that had the 2 main colors going back and forth, back and forth. And then there were others that were beside them, like these other things are going to come in. And it was all very analytical. And I can honestly tell you, in the rest of my life, I am not an analytical person. I am an emotional, spiritual creature. But when I sit down to write, that's the only way I can make sense of that world, to put it like that. And you might tell your students, not only does she do that with color coded, she does it with sticky notes because things shift when you're writing. Things change when you're writing. Right now, David and I are in the middle of revising Hearts of Fire and Snow, and we are having to shift entire scenes up and down in the chapters, and it's a struggle.
Post-its come in handy.
Yeah, if you don't have something on the wall that you can say, okay, now this, move it here, and it's as easy as that, and you can physically see it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. And then as an educator, as an English teacher, then I'm like, oh, that's wonderful because a lot of times, like I said, kids just want to write right away. And they think that their first draft is perfect. And I mean, yes, it's perfect, but we can make it better, and there's
Always,
always ways
always.
that you can revise and edit it and, add more depth to your writing. And so it's fascinating that you say that, because it's true.
Yeah.
And I love, again, that you said how you're so analytical with some things. That's kind of me in the library. Like, I'm very OCD about things, because
Yeah.
everything has its place and everything has a specific location. And in other areas of my life, I'm not as strict or rigid, but I love that. You see, we have so many things.
I think for me, especially when I'm writing, I have to say, in my classroom, I always color coded everything. Like, everybody's different classes have different colors and things like that. But it's a matter of survival for me. I have so much going on all the time, not just in the physical world, but in the emotional and in the mental world, that I need to get organized if I'm going to survive.
Yeah, so true. It's true. Let's see, we have a couple more questions. Okay, so now to some heavier things. Echoes of Grace discusses some heavy topics, such as the tragic death of a child, dealing with grief, right? Mercy is having to deal with the grief. She goes about it maybe some wrong ways, but she's a young mother and she's dealing with a lot. There's also the intergenerational trauma that the mom experienced, crimes against women, and having to heal from that hurt and from that trauma. What do you hope that readers will take away from reading this book? And all readers in general, whether they're male or female, live in the border or live in Abilene, what can they get out of Echoes of Grace?
I hope that this book becomes like a conversation starter. I hope that when a young woman or a young man reads this book, or a young lady reads this book, and they talk to an adult, and it can start a conversation, and it can say, where do we go from here? I know she's trying to say there's mercy and grace, but how do I go about that? And how do I go about making a difference and calling attention to these problems, and calling attention to the need for solutions, for the need for new laws, new statutes that change the way we deal with victims and with perpetrators? And how do we go to making safer spaces, not just for ourselves, but for our community and everyone else in the world? And so young people right now, I tell them this all the time when I visit, they are the future leaders, the future teachers, the future healers. And as such, they have the capacity, the opportunity, and the intelligence to take these topics on, to take on these social injustices and make a difference in the world. What a great world we would have if we all did our part, and if we all clamored for solution, clamored for mercy, clamored for grace for people who have been traumatized or hurt in the world. And so I hope that this is a call to action to everyone.
Beautiful. Yeah, I have high hopes for Gen Z. I have, two teens at home, and I see them and I hear them, and I'm like, oh, there is hope. There is hope.
Yeah.
So wonderful. I do hope that our students will read the book, will be inspired to ask for help, to seek help, to, sometimes it is kind of taboo in our culture, to talk about mental health, to talk about grief. Sometimes people think like, you just suck it up. You just keep on living. You just keep on keeping on. And it's important to offer ourselves that grace and that mercy and seek help. And like you said, then once you're healed, you can now that you know better, do better, right? And help
Right.
with systemic, injustices, speaking up for those that can't speak out for themselves and whatnot.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, that was one of the things that I wanted to do too when I had the father to ask her, do you need me to get you help? I will get you help. I should have done that for your mother. That was a really important moment for me because I wanted that narrative started, those conversations started, because like you said, we don't have those conversations. And so we need to have parents who support each other and people who support each other and say, hey, I see you're suffering. Do you need help? Can I get you help? And thank you for pointing that out.
Yes, no, it's beautiful. And I think our students, our kiddos, anybody that reads it, but particularly our YA group, right? That they can start these conversations that perhaps were taboo at their own home, but that they are able to speak out and to get educated, because like you said, and like I mentioned, the more we know, the better we can do with our future generations and healing that generational trauma.
Yeah.
So we're kind of done with questions about the book. Questions that I had created, but I don't know, is there anything else that you would like to explain to us about Echoes of Grace? It's a beautiful cover, by the way. It's so intriguing. It just, draws your attention to the two sisters.
When I first saw it, the first thing I did was just bawl. Honestly, I just cried. It was so beautiful. I exceeded my expectations. So I was just blown away by it.
Yes. Beautiful.
I don't really have anything else. I think I covered everything. I think you covered everything.
Good. I'm glad that we covered all the main important topics. I know that you have a book that just came out this year, The Secret of the Moon Conch, right? That is a book that you and David Bowles wrote together. Would you like to share a little bit about that book?
Absolutely. So once upon a time, I was sitting around without a project that was really manifesting. I had a lot of little things on the stove, but simmering, but nothing was manifesting. And so then I was sitting there and I had just watched The Lake House with Sandra Bullock.
Yes.
And the credits were rolling and I thought out loud to myself and said, now, why can't someone write something like that, but for YA? Mm-hmm. And my husband was in the kitchen a few feet away from me because we had a tiny apartment. And he's cooking or something in there. And he says, well, I don't know. Maybe if we had a YA author in the room, we could ask her.
I love it.
Now I'm going to have to now I'm just going to think about that. Like, that's all I'm going to be able to think about. And it was weird because within seconds, I knew what this was. I said, okay, she is a girl in a small village in Mexico, and she's just lost her last living relative in Mexico, her grandmother. And now this guy who is, like a low-level criminal kind of gangster or drug guy wants to get with her. And she's like, no, I have to run away. I have to go to my father. But he abandoned them when she was very little and lives in the United States. And all she knows is that he lives in Texas. And so she decides to head out, right? Her grandmother had also given her the address to her godmother, her madrina, who lives in San Antonio. And so she thought, I'll ask my madrina for, refuge, and then I can help myself and go find my father. And I thought that's perfect because she's fleeing from something really dangerous, and now she has to make this journey. And who would have that kind of situation? And then I thought, because it has to be a time difference, right? Like huge amount of time. In the Lake House, it was like 3 years. But I wanted it a little bit more. So I thought he is an Aztec warrior during the fall of Tenochtitlan. And the Spanish are after them. They are like tearing the city down, stripping it of everything and killing everybody. And he is a warrior. So he is at the point where he knows he's not going to win this thing and he has to leave. And he's being persecuted and captured and everything else that happens in the novel. And I thought, that's great. And somehow they have an artifact that has survived through the generations. And this artifact connects them. But I don't know what the artifact is, but I'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And so I started sitting there, I thought, wait a minute, I don't know anything about the fall of Tenochtitlan. And it would take me 10 years to research and write this novel. And I thought, oh, darn it, too bad I can't write it. And then it hit me. I know David knows everything there is to know. I mean, he knows a lot about Tenochtitlan. He even teaches Nahua. And I thought, I'm going to ask him if he'll like support me in this project, like read it with, give me sources and help me, do a good job with it. Right. And I knew I was going to see him in a few days. We're going to go to a conference. And so the more the days go by, I'm like fighting not to text him to ask him to do this favor of helping me research. But the more the days go by, the more I realize, wait a minute, I don't have to do this myself. David could write the guy and I could write the girl, and it would be perfect because I wouldn't have to take 5 years to learn everything. And so I asked him, he said yes. And it took us about 2 years of kind of like meeting up at conferences and sending each other emails and really putting it together. But he's the one that had, when I told him about it and he agreed to do it, he had just read about a sacred conch that had been found, and it was in a museum, and it had all the glyphs of the Nahua. And so he's the one that came up with the conch concept.
Wow.
And 5 years later, here we are.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad that you guys partnered up and were able to tell this. It sounds like an amazing story. I can't wait to read it. So thank you very much for sharing about that. Are there any other books that you have in the works or any other tidbits that you can share with us?
Yes, it was announced already. And Summer of the Mariposas, which is right there beside you.
Yes.
I'm writing a trilogy called Seasons of Sisterhood. And it's the rest of the story told from each of the other sisters. So it's a trilogy because it's Belia and Delia's story, which is an Antigone retelling, because that's an Odyssey, right? So Belia and Delia is an Antigone. Then there's Juanita's story, and that's a Frankenstein retelling. And then Pita's story, where you find out what her real name is, because her name is not Pita, that's her nickname. You find out what her real name is, and that's a retelling of Beowulf. And so there's 3 more middle grade novels coming your way.
I love it. That's fantastic because you're pretty much answering what your favorite books are, right? Your favorite literature icons that you look up to, right? And then you're emulating in your books. And then it also is a great thing to have for our classrooms, right? A lot of our students might get, nervous, apprehensive, put off by these British writers, right? And so then to have like a retelling in something that is something that they might be a little bit more familiar with, and make it easier for them to understand, and for the students also that they can like compare and contrast the two.
Yeah.
Lovely. I'm excited. These sound great.
Thank you. It's all about, we're not trying to get rid of older books. We're not supplanting, we're supporting.
Yeah, exactly.
We are walking side by side and saying the same themes. Look at these beautiful themes. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to suffer? And what does it mean to triumph over those pains? And all of that, it can be told even today, but we can show them that those same themes have been with humans since humans became humans.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to read them, and I can't wait for our students to read them as well. and then, see you in TLA, or maybe for them to be a part of Spirit again, the Spirit of Texas. And so thank you so much for everything that you do. I know you have a plate full of things to do. You know, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a professor, you're an author, you have many hats. And so I thank you for taking the time to write these beautiful stories and to have, like I mentioned, representation in our shelves for our kiddos. Thank you, Guadalupe.
It's my pleasure to have joined you today, and thank you so much. And please thank the committee for choosing Echoes of Grace. It is a blessing in my life.
Well, you can thank her now too. Here's our Lauren Scott. She's our oh my God, I finally messed up.
Oh no, you didn't mess up. I'm the spot chair, but it is all good. I love listening. I could listen to Guadalupe and you talk for hours. So I've been just sitting back enjoying this whole interview. But thank you so much for joining us today for our Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight with Guadalupe Garcia McCall. Be sure to check out our Spirit of Texas website, where we have book club activities, read-alikes, and more for Echoes of Grace and for all of our 2023 Spirit of Texas books and authors. Stay tuned for our next episode, coming soon to the Texas Library Association's Young Adult Roundtable YouTube channel and to our Spirit of Texas website. And just thank you again, Guadalupe and Nellie. That was such a fantastic conversation you guys had, and I cannot wait to share it with everyone.
You're welcome.